All right, unfiltered, unbuttoned, and no doubt unapologetic. If you've been following us closely over the last couple of weeks, you will no doubt know that we have unpacked a considerable amount of heavy content when it comes to the demand across the country for police accountability, transparency, at these mass demonstrations that have just developed all across the country, including right here in Charlotte. That won't be going away anytime soon for good reason. A lot of things that need to be examined, I think we'd all agree, in the profession. We're going to take a little bit of a break from the action, though, because there's something else to discuss that's been monumental, and that is the departure of our current police chief, Kerr Putney, who was gracious enough to take a couple of minutes with his docket that you could just well imagine has been slamming over the last several weeks, mere days until he calls it quits after 3 decades in the profession.
3 working days.
Yeah, but who's counting?
Days.
Where's your head at?
Who's counting?
Where's your head at? I mean, this has got to be a big departure for you. You've known nothing but service for the last 3 decades, so I can't imagine waking up and finding myself in this space if I was you.
Yeah, it is. I tell you, I thought it would be more monumental, the feeling. It probably hasn't really hit me until next Wednesday when we're swearing in Chief Jennings, but I'm ready. I'm excited. I really am. The passion's there for the young people, the youth that we want to work with. I'm going to continue that. People are asking me what I'm going to do. I'm going to double down in that work. And then I got some consulting opportunities I'm pursuing as well. So I don't think people have heard the last of me just yet. But I like being in the background as well.
Well, the rumor mill's been in full swing. Everything from that you're taking a police chief's position in another state out west to running for office. What can you say and what can you discount? So
there will be no other chiefs positions. You know, there's a couple out there that were available. I'm not interested. I'm not. This is my only place that I intend to be a chief. As far as politics, they say never. I'm saying absolutely not. I don't have an interest. I'm not interested in that at all. I don't know that I want to be a public figure moving forward. I want to do a lot of work, but I don't know that I want to do it in that type of venue.
And you've really, knowing you as well as I know you, you've really never been comfortable in that space with the politics side of things. You know, some would argue a cop's cop who really had very little patience for politics. It was more about public safety and more about people. Listen,
politics are necessary. I just don't care for a lot of the politicians who are involved in them. So, yeah, that's just not an area of interest that I have, and it's not really an area that I think right now we're struggling as a country in that area, and I don't want to be a part of that.
In terms of what, Chief? I know that you're pretty resolute and you have your convictions when it comes to certain things. I also know that you have some grave concern with this current state of affairs in the country.
I absolutely do. The division is troubling, and it's getting worse. I mean, it's almost like there's no reasonable middle ground anymore. You have to pick an extreme side, one way or the other, and that's just not how I choose to live my life. So
there's always room for people to come together and agree.
There's always a reasonable, logical position that you can land on and find some agreement. But right now, because of the volume of the noise, it's hard to hit that sweet spot.
Well, how about leading a major city police department, living in that space during a time in the country historically where we probably haven't seen as much divisiveness as what we see right now? That can't be an easy endeavor.
It is not. People talk about threading the needle, that the eye of that needle is smaller and smaller. There's no room for error in the policing profession. The goal is perfection, and we're human. It's hard to meet that, to achieve that standard, and I think it's really unfair to hold any profession to that standard, but that's where we find ourselves. And politically, the pressure's great, and for me, I am a cop's cop, so whenever there's a demand externally, I got to make sure I weigh the impact internally as well, because we have a good culture here, and it's easy to sacrifice that if all you care about is the external politics and pressure that come along with a major city chief's job.
You talked about the concern you had for the divisiveness in the country. Just as great of a concern for the future of the profession?
Well, I don't know, man. To be honest with you, I think we don't give those who choose to come into this line of work enough credit. I'm inspired by the young people coming in who, even in the midst of everything that we're seeing, how sometimes the profession is even being vilified, they still want to take an oath to answer that call, to bring some calm in the midst of chaos. So I think I'm hopeful, but right now the division is pretty vast.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like it. Just in the last month, the way that the earth is just tilted off its axis to the extent that it has. You yourself, let's talk a little bit about. We could get into reform, and
Sure.
that's something that's not foreign to you. You've got some pretty strong convictions about reform, responsible reform.
Without a doubt, we must continue to reform, but we must do it responsibly. People are asking about, Chief, how do you respond to this demand or that demand? Ultimately, you look at what's reasonable, and I think that is almost something that people don't find palatable anymore. They're not looking for reason and logic and a historical explanation and then talk about how to improve. They just want to see something different. They want immediate action. And I think sometimes that can be irresponsible. But I also say be careful what you ask for. If you take the police out of play, the defund and the removal of that profession, you need to be very damn sure you have something that replaces it. Because I don't know a lot of people who are going to respond to a 911 call any day of the week, anytime, night or day, and put themselves in harm's way the way cops do. So I think we need to be a bit more thoughtful as we go down this road. But responsible, logical, reasonable, rational reform is absolutely necessary. And I'm proud of this organization for having been doing this for so long.
This is a profession that, by all accounts, you probably never envisioned, you definitely didn't envision ever being a part of, much less a major city police chief.
Sure.
Policing wasn't your bag back in the day.
No, policing wasn't my bag and cops weren't my people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's interesting. I had a plan, and the ultimate plan, the creator's plan, was more powerful always, and that's what I'm seeing through. So what I do see, though, is an opportunity. It's giving me a platform, and it's giving me an opportunity to grow, but it's also giving me an opportunity to really hone in on my passion for helping young people make good decisions and give them a little bit of hope, a bit more access, and a bit more opportunity. That's what I'm looking to do. Talk
about your journey. Coming up, you had your journey with law enforcement, which wasn't exactly a pleasant or favorable journey with law enforcement early on.
Sure.
The death of your dad, convinced that your dad was murdered.
Yes.
Small town.
Correct.
And never really followed up on.
Sure.
Your mind, your journey was because he was African American, and they just didn't take the time to investigate.
Yeah, I thought they saw it as another black man dead. Pulled his body out of the river. He'd been murdered, and there was never an investigation. So, yeah, that seems to reasonably taint anyone, and I was no exception. I never liked the profession, had any regard for it after that until, entering the academy. And that wasn't by choice, right? I didn't decide to do it. It was, I was still seething, and I saw how they treated one of my fraternity brothers, first black person I've ever met who wanted to be a cop. And they turned him down, and I thought, here we go again, it's racial. And, famous last words, watch this. And I applied. So here I sit today because of that.
Yeah, and it's been one hell of a journey ever since. 3 decades, elevated all the way to the top of the food chain.
Sure.
A lot of terms being thrown around right now. Systemic racism
Sure.
in the profession. Is this a profession with systemic racism?
Here's what I'll tell you. I will never say there is no racism, because it does exist, obviously. But to talk about it systemically, I never do that, because I think that's an excuse to not roll your sleeves up and tackle the hard work. I'm waiting to see where somebody can empirically show me specifically what we're talking about when we talk about this systemic racism in policing in particular. And then they focus on, well, we got a lot of black people who are being shot by cops. Right, and that outcome in and of itself, because of the disparity there based on the population, is their proof. You got to think a little deeper than that, I think. And when we can attribute specifically it to race, it is what it is, because racism does exist.
Yeah, you're not foolish enough to think that there are not men and women in this profession who don't have good hearts and the best intentions in mind, and possibly even racism in that.
Without a doubt, yes. And which is why we do all the things we do to try to prevent and then try to alert us to anything that could be that significant and that problematic for the profession and a police department. But truthfully, I think we talk about institutional and systemic racism because a lot of us aren't willing to do the work to overcome racism. And that is connecting with people different than you, allowing for the access and opportunity that some have that others don't, and giving everybody the personal responsibility that you have to do certain things a certain way to let those talents and abilities take you as far as you can with those opportunities and access that you gain. So that's just how I see it. I think personally we have to invest in trying to prevent those racist acts, call them out, hold people accountable when they see them, but don't give a blanket excuse of people to say it's just systemic racism. That's just the way that profession is. I think it's a cop-out.
You know, in this conversation, obviously, it's not going to go away anytime soon, and I think we both agree for good reason. You know, there should always be scrutiny, there should always be discussion, and dialogue,
accountability,
and reform.
No doubt.
Talk about you now, your profession, 30 years. You know, you've managed some pretty high-profile stuff. I've been, you know, shoulder to shoulder with you on a lot of it. You know, some of the bigger things that really stick with you. You talk about 2016. 2016 was a big flashpoint for your career. I know that, you know, we spent a lot of time together. You learned a lot, you grew a lot, and there were a lot of things that developed in 2016.
No doubt, but I go back even further. I go back to 2013. I go back to the Jonathan Ferrell case.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one that still haunts me. I mean, everybody focuses on 2016, and that's supposed to be the big incident and the big time in which I'm remembered. But I go back before that when that fundamentally changed everything for me. That case still haunts me. When I look at that particular case where somebody was shot unarmed, it's hard to defend, right? And, you know, it played out, it went through the system and all that, but still, it's troubling that we in this profession can have something so tragic happen. I think that's really what changed it for me. And then, as chief, 2016 happened, and that's what everybody focuses on because it got so much attention, national attention, even global attention, really, with the aftermath.
You know, let's back up to you know, the Carrick case. What didn't get a lot of attention was you didn't take over as police chief too soon thereafter. That during the time that this was before the courts and everything,
yes, sure,
cut your teeth under Rodney Monroe, but sure, you're thrust right into the middle of this whole thing as, you know, the newly minted police chief.
Yes. That
could have been a damn powder keg.
Well, it was, actually. Luckily, the fuse didn't get lit. But I tell you, I attribute it really to the Ferrell family, the mom in particular. Just salt of the earth. She continued to tell everybody who would listen that she wanted peace. She wanted to honor her son. And you juxtapose that to what we're seeing now, it's a different time. You know, it's a different time. I just think, though, coming into that trial initially, everybody was watching, externally and internally.
Oh, for sure, internally,
and
that's without a doubt.
You know, there were some forums that we had internally that weren't very pretty, weren't very kind. But, you know, I stand by trying to do the right thing, and, you know, I'm going to fight for the right thing, and I'll fight whoever's in front of me towards that end. And, you know, I didn't make a lot of friends internally with that. But if, you know, right is right and wrong is wrong, and if we're fighting about what I believe is right, then how many rounds are we going to go? Because I'm built for that kind of fight.
You talked about, you know, can't make friends.
No.
You just can't. You know, you want to please everybody. You don't get into policing. Sell ice cream. You know, that'll make everybody happy, right?
Sure.
Ain't the kind of work for that. How tough of a balancing act is that, you know, to keep the community safe, keep favor with the community, and internally, morale's an important thing. If you don't have the troops on the line doing this work that are supportive, you've got problems. I
know, but the other thing that I learned throughout that case in particular, and then 16 as well, and forward from that, is you got to listen. You know, I'm quick to respond when you ask a question or when you make a statement, and it's kind of speedy. Well, I'm getting better, but I'm getting slower at that.
Why'd you wait so damn long?
Right. But when you step back and actually listen, just hear them to listen and understand, you get a lot more out of it.
Let's fast forward to 2016.
Sure.
I know that some lessons and some development surely came out of that situation, as tragic as it was as well. What are some of your bigger takeaways going back to the Keith Lamont Scott?
Sure. Again, I think it comes back to communication and being heard. Social media was, I think, our Achilles heel at that time. We got overrun with a narrative that we could never catch up to.
Yeah.
And once that's out there, nowadays we are faster at responding, to make sure we put out what we factually know. But the days of giving a briefing and then going quiet are done, because people put a message out and put snippets and bits and pieces of a story that might not tell you the whole factual story. And the lesson of communication, listening and immediately communicating, was the big takeaway. The other thing is I felt personally I grew. I found my voice. I've never been afraid to share my opinion. I just became more resolute that my opinion is going to be told in my own voice, tone, passion, and all.
And that's not everyone's cup of tea. That's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, well, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. You like me or you don't, and I'm good either way, because what I took this profession to do was to be better and to make improvements, not only personally, but impact the profession as well. And that's still a part of my mission.
A lot of, some of your critics, they could say, he's very firm, very strident, very resistant.
Yeah. They're not going to say all that, do they?
Well, not today, but recently.
My response to that? Okay.
I don't know why they would ever come up with such a hasty conclusion like that. Yeah. I remember, the Keith Lamont Scott, and we spent countless hours together. And I remember you walking across the street and doing some media interviews and just seeing all the swirl that was developing in the streets of Charlotte, and just that look on your face. Overwhelmed, surprised, disappointed. Did you ever think it would manifest to that major of a development?
Really, the disappointment was that the politics just took over. We had some statements made by politicians that just, I think were totally inappropriate.
There's that P word again, the politics.
Yeah, which is why never say never, but absolutely not.
Yeah, and I remember that. That was, it did get a little adversarial there.
That hurt our ability to communicate externally, and it really had a significant impact internally, because once you get into, again, the us against them, you don't make a lot of progress. And we were definitely in that type of a situation. And so then you have to, circle the horses, circle the wagons, and it's almost like a internal versus external fight, which is not good.
No.
And it was totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
And that made that time period even more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Enough challenges on the table,
Sure.
and then to
Sure.
throw that one on the pile, that
Yes.
certainly didn't make things any easier.
No doubt.
Coming off of that, I still am a firm believer. Probably you've never recognized, but I watched you closely. I've watched you for more than a decade, and I could honestly say this is just my journey, and having known the man and watched the man for as long as I did, that changed you. It really did change you.
Sure, it did. But again, I think I'm never a victim. I think it made me better, made me stronger. I don't care what your position or your title is. I believe right is right. I've been mistaken a lot. I don't think I've ever been wrong. I've been mistaken. And when I make a mistake, I own it. My dad said, conquer your fears, own your mistakes, and persevere. And I live that, If I make a mistake, I want to own it. And I expect it of our people, thus the accountability. But if you own it, and it's something that we can survive, we'll survive together. But if you don't take the responsibility, and I think that's the huge takeaway for me, is I own every misstep I've ever made. I do. But I challenge people who've never done this job at this level to meet with a family whose life a member of your organization just took. Yeah. That's not an easy conversation. So in those conversations, stay with you. Those are the things that you can't shake. You can't minimize, because they have an impact, because I can connect to them. I would have loved for somebody in this profession to reach out to me and have apologized for the trauma that I'd experienced and the difficulty that I was experiencing as a 10-year-old when my dad was murdered, instead of acting like this is just normal business, another black person dead, let's move on, nothing to see here. So Monroe did the same thing, Chief Monroe. We're going to talk to the family because that's the dignified and right thing to do. Right. Not easy, but it's the right thing to do. Right. Those are lessons that you never forget, and those are the things that speak to your culture as an organization, and those are the things that gain traction. Well,
I think it also speaks to your integrity and your human approach to it, and those conversations are conversations that the community really never gets to see. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to see a lot of those conversations and hear about a lot of those conversations, and whenever there was an officer-involved shooting or an officer who had gone down and gotten banged up, get me the number, and he's right there on the telephone or paying a visit and having those difficult conversations. I couldn't begin to imagine what those conversations must be like and the toll it must take, not only on that family member, sure. but you as the leader of the organization.
Well, listen, it becomes a part of what we do, but the families who, that's what pulls at the heartstrings. That loss is not something that they'll ever really get over. Yeah. They eventually can get beyond and continue life, but that is something that tragically stays with them. And just be able to let them know that I empathize, I think goes a long way. Truly, and the humanizing of this profession is really the biggest challenge. Therein lies the nuance in this line of work, that until you've had to arrest someone whose freedom was very near and dear to them, sure. and you had to take that away, you don't understand what that struggle is going to be like.
Sure.
And people talk about de-escalation as if it's just something that you should magically do when you show up.
Well, and now those struggles
it's not that simple.
And those struggles now have never been more visible than they are right now. I mean, when you were cutting your teeth as a new officer, they didn't have body-worn cameras. True. These things, nobody had these things around. So every single move that these officers make out there on the line now is scrutinized, criticized, oftentimes demonized, and that's got to be a tough row to hoe for your line cop.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm amazed that they continue, though, to show up, take that oath, and when somebody calls, they answer the call. It's inspiring. I mean, truly, it's inspiring. Yet, I continue to say accountability is what it is. We need it, mm-hmm. because there are some people who come into this job with bad intentions who shouldn't be here.
Sure.
And I'm going to tell you, I made it my mission too. I'm not going to rest until I get them out of here. And that didn't sit well with some of our people here, because they think I'm on a witch hunt. I never am. You stay off my radar if you do right by people. It's just that simple.
21 officers or employees of the department cited for termination just over the last 3 years under your administration. Some, though, don't know that you don't have a magic wand, or it's not as simple as just you scratching out a cite for termination form. There are checks and balances, sure. And sometimes the officers are actually given back to the department by the Civil Service Board. That's got to be frustrating.
It can be frustrating, yeah, because if somebody doesn't deserve to be here and they come back and then something else very bad happens, I'm still to blame for that. That can be frustrating, because if I don't get final say, somebody else should be taking quite a bit of the blame.
Is that something that needs to be examined?
If you're talking about responsible form, absolutely.
Let's get back to you, though.
Sure.
What has this profession done to you personally?
Well, truthfully, man, it's made me sacrifice a lot of those opportunities with family. It really has. And, it is what it is. But
not it is what it is. I mean, you talk about that, Chief. I mean, people don't. I'm going to tell them straight up, because this guy's never going to do it.
Let me just finish. But you miss opportunities to be with family for games. You miss promotions to milestone grades and stuff like. You miss it. You miss or when you're there, you're exhausted because you're standing on the scene of a tragic homicide, right, where there was another senseless murder for no reason of a young person. And so, yeah, it does have an impact. But the other thing is you're always on alert. You're always waiting for that alert. So whatever you're doing with your family, you're not really as connected as you should be,
yep.
you're on call.
Yep, sleeping with one eye open.
No doubt, no doubt. And that impacts you too. I mean, your weight fluctuates. You are irritable. Those kinds of things play out. So it does. It has an impact, man. And the other thing is you're I can be very guarded, even with family, because there's a lot going on that people don't understand, and you don't want to burden them with what you're carrying.
Amen. Amen.
But truthfully, they're going to see it and feel it anyway. So it's just not fair to them.
Yeah, it's tough enough. I'm in your camp, and I struggle with that at times myself. And opening up, it's tough enough that we carry it, and then try to expose our families to it. You know, we don't want to burden anyone else with the burden that we shoulder. And my burden is nowhere nearly as tough of a burden as what you. I mean, Jesus, you can't go into restaurants without people eyeing you and watching you.
But the problem with me is I'd like some anonymity, so there's none of that. So you're with your family, and people, want to come up to you. The vast majority is positive, but you just don't know. So there's always that, again, you're always almost on edge, and that affects you in all kinds of ways, but it also affects your family.
Yeah, I probably spent more time with you than my wife over the last decade, and by the way, and she's eternally grateful for that. Well,
sure.
But you are.
I'm sure I've met you.
You are a private guy, and some would interpret that as being somewhat aloof. Yeah.
That's one of the words I've heard. Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm introverted. That's where I draw my energy, and that's just who I am. And you just got to deal.
Looking back on 3 decades, regrets?
Yeah, my regret, and I've been pretty clear at this, is that I wasn't more mature earlier, because this was a career field that I never would have even considered, and I regret that.
Saddest thing over the 30 years that you could recall? And I know that's a sweeping kind of question, and there's probably a lot of tragedy and some triumph, and we can talk about the triumph in a second. If you were to kind of bumper sticker that.
Saddest thing is the impact this work has on your family. I mean, getting threats, having to have somebody sit up on your house because cowards want to threaten you. Anybody want to come meet me man to man, let's go. But to threaten my family when I'm at work, I think is cowardly and disappointing and quite sad.
Yeah, and those threats were real during the Keith Lamont Scott riots. You had to have people sitting on.
Some of our current officers are getting them too. So it's still just as sad and sick and cowardly.
Yeah, the community probably doesn't recognize or realize that on anything that we communicated externally, but there was a point in 2016 where routinely his home had to be watched 24/7, his wife and his children, because of those credible threats that he was getting. Obviously,
me among many, though. Me among many.
Yeah, I guess it comes with the territory, as sad as that is. Triumphs. Some of your bigger triumphs, things that look at him beaming.
Listen,
all of a sudden, he's beaming.
Crazy. I'm trying not to smile on camera. I'm not supposed to do that. But,
you don't want to do anything to the brand.
Listen, no question, the Envision Academy started with just 20 kids who we wanted to expose to all the opportunity and hope that we have in the city in business, arts, and the public sector, and started with just 20 kids for the summer. Now we've tripled that size. We have people competing to host them. People talk about legacy. If there's only anything that anybody ever remembers me by in this Envision Academy, I'm good. Not to mention the Turning Point Academy, the Reach Academy. Those are things that I'm proud of. And as you can see, I'm not smiling anymore, but I could not be more pleased on those outcomes.
And look at
we're breaking that cycle of violence, and we're showing people who don't have access and opportunity a little bit of hope. And that's what I'm looking to do in the next 3 days when I'm done here. Yeah,
and we're going to get to that in just a second. So if you were to unpack it and say legacy, it's the work that you've done around access and opportunity for children.
That's what I think my mission in life is. So people are like, what are you going to do when you retire? Well, I'm going to do that until I'm dead. And I like being able to do it now kind of off the grid behind the scenes, because I'm tired of being in front of cameras.
I mean, to be quite honest, I didn't even know if you were going to show up for this thing. So, I'm just eternally grateful that you found it in your heart to even make it away across the street, because it got a little dicey there for a second.
Your ratings are so great. How could I resist?
Well, this is only going to help in that regard. If people are reading the tea leaves closely, they heard you on several occasions not too long ago say, once untethered, my voice is going to get a little bit louder and stronger, if you can imagine that.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean?
Listen, I got a face for radio, so we'll see where that materializes. But truthfully, the other piece is accountability. We need accountability across the whole justice system. And I told you months ago, by sheer force of will, we're going to have that, because everybody focuses on us as the police. And we're at the tip of the spear. And I told you, responsible reform is an absolute necessity. But everybody in the system needs to be held accountable. When we are allowing repeat violent criminal offenders to terrorize the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable, we're falling short of true justice. And everybody along that chain who allows for that needs to be called out. And they're going to hear from me and my voice doing just some of that.
And just to kind of give you more latitude now, not being tethered to the position gives you a little bit more latitude to speak your mind. Because I'll tell you, I've seen you frustrated before,
Sure.
but I've never seen you more frustrated than when a repeat
Sure.
violent offender
Sure.
is out there and victimizes another one of our community members.
Just this week, we've had somebody who robbed a victim. And I said, well, what is their history? They'd been arrested 27 times, and 4 of them were related to violence, in particular robbery. Yeah. So that to me just is unconscionable, and we have to get better. I believe in working with young people to help them make good decisions and take personal responsibility to do so. Mm-hmm. But those who choose to continue to prey on the most vulnerable, there's a place for you. And you should not be able to be free if that is the life choice you're going to make, to prey on others. And I'm passionate about that. Right?
3 decades in the business, and now you're off to the races in just a couple of days.
Don't know that I'm going to leave the community. I think there's a lot of work that I want to contribute to here. Bittersweet about the agency. It's really all sweet, really. There's no bitter. It's time for me to go. I think I've given all I could right here in the organization, really. I can support them from the outside.
No less support for our incoming police chief, Johnny Jennings.
Sure.
Big Johnny Jennings fan, I know you are. Community, they're going to be impressed with this fella.
He's a good man. He is. I think he's ready to do this job too. He has his own style to doing it, and the community needs to give him that opportunity to showcase all that he brings to bear in policing. I think he'll be a very good man for the job at the right time.
Chief, any final thoughts? You know, I know that this isn't going to be the last we hear of you. You know, we're going to be hearing a lot more of you, maybe even louder and stronger, he says.
I can promise you it won't be the last you hear me. Final thoughts, man, is this. It's been a blessing. It really has. I mean, there are always highs and lows, but there have been many more highs. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to continue to do the work that needs to be done that didn't get as much publicity because it was overshadowed with a lot of the negative things and the narrative that continues. But it's exciting. I thank the city, the community, people who taught us community policing and continue to do so. This is a fantastic city that has a lot of potential, and I just challenge us as a community not to waste it.
Godspeed to you, my man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother.
All right. Well, that was something. Got him on the couch and somewhat opened up, not to the extent that I could have and maybe he should have, but that doesn't surprise me a bit. He talked about how guarded he is, and I got Tommy one take on the back end.
You were close. You were close.
You got him. Almost got him there a couple of times. You know, hey, look, man, end of an era. You know, 3 decades, and a lot of us have, have served under this guy and grew, and seen a lot of changes in the department as a result of his leadership. Your thoughts?
It was interesting. I mean, I learned a little bit, myself, just sitting back and watching that interview. I don't think he's running for politics anytime soon.
Doesn't sound like it.
I don't think he likes politicians either. That was interesting.
I think that would be a gross understatement. I think he's got more of a problem with the politics creeping into the public safety end of things, and that's where he really gets spun up.
I think he has a passion for some of those topics that get political, but I just don't think he wants to. He sees himself in that role, and hey, he knows that, and that's fine.
Yeah, his star is rising, and he's going to have just a multitude of suitors who are going to be after his time, and sky's the limit for young guy, smart guy like that. The family, the impact that it's had on its family. I mean, just he undersold it, but I mean, this business is it's taken its toll on him, and I know how guarded he is when it comes to things like that. And that was one of my bigger takeaways, having worked with him for as long as I did. And this was not a guy who cut corners. If he took a 3-day weekend, it was a lot. I mean, rarely did the guy ever go on vacation, take any time off. We're all waiting. My gosh, when is this guy going to go on vacation so we can get a little time? We take a 3-day weekend, we feel like we're robbing a damn bank. That's just a work. It was day and night. It never stopped. And I always say that there's an adage that for every year of police chiefing is like a dog year. You know, you see these men and women, you know, they come in, they're spry, they're exuberant, and a lot of times they just walk out of these major city police departments just haggard and just beaten down. He still has his wits about him and still seems to have a lot of energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think cops understand, you know, what it does to a family. I think it's hard for the public to really see that. And, I mean, you know the guy probably better than anybody. I mean, what have you seen over the years? Well,
and you saw just how passionate, and some would argue even flat out angry. Here we are, 4 years removed, you know, with the, you know, Keith Lamont Scott thing, and I was with him shoulder to shoulder on that, and he was, it's God's honest truth. They had to have cars on his house where he lived at that time, day and night, because of just the level of threats that his family were receiving during that time. He takes that personally, and anybody would, for professionalism aside. You know, it's your family that's, you know, that's being threatened, and not surprising that that's still on the forefront of his mind, and you know, should be. I think the bigger takeaway for me with him was, you know, the accountability and the ownership. You know, he had very little patience for people who didn't own up to their mistakes. You know, forgiven kind of guy. We all screw up, you know. Where you lose them, though, is if you deflect and you're trying to put it off on someone else, pass the buck down the line. That's when the man would get impatient and downright angry at times, when people just wouldn't take ownership for things.
One of my favorite lines was when he said that he makes mistakes, but he's never wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and wordsmith at that. For
yeah,
sure.
And you know, when I think of Chief Putney, that line right there is him. You know, yeah. It's funny to hear him say he's an introvert, because, you know, we see him out here all the time, you know, doing these media stand-ups, and you wouldn't quite think that, but you get that. And, yeah, that one line just kind of captured his whole, you know.
You see him doing those media, you know, stand-ups and press conferences a lot, but what you don't see oftentimes is his reluctance, you know. On a number of accounts, he is a guarded guy.
Yep.
You know, he wants to measure every word. So there's that. He's always just very, very guarded with what he's communicating out publicly. And then there's also a level of wanting others to flourish, putting others out in front, allowing them to develop and grow. And, you know, he was never an out front kind of guy who wants to steal the limelight. You know, there are police chiefs across the country, they can't run in front of the camera quickly enough. That wasn't him. He was far more interested and found far more value in watching the men and women in the organization and get that face time and develop.
I think we touched on that when you had Deputy Chief Jennings in here, and their styles are very different. Yeah. And just because he's not that kind of upfront guy, Putney, doesn't mean that's a problem. There's anything wrong with that.
Oh, there was the leadership was never in question, for sure.
Exactly. You know, and with him, I think the one thing is people just always want to know that he had their backs, and I think he always put the officers first.
Well, let me ask you that. You know, you're on the line. You're with our office now, but you know, cop, right? Cops love the guy.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think a lot of times, like, I've seen some behind the scenes stuff the last couple of months, and that's one thing that I've really gotten to see more than maybe some line officers do. As line officers, yes, we generally felt. I can't speak for everyone. I speak for myself, and that, you know, I generally felt that he always had our backs. Right. I've seen a little more of that the last couple of months, and I think that's something that, you know, I wish was out there more, that more people knew. Not to say that there's people that didn't feel that way. You know, everyone's going to have their own opinions.
Oh, everybody's got their own journeys, and, you know, cops are, you know, they're tough customers to please, you know, as well as I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, I think that harkens back to him kind of wanting to just, you know, hey, I don't want the fanfare, I don't want the attention, I don't want all the gravitas. I do what I do for the greater good, for the community, for the organization, for the culture. You know, if they recognize it, great. If not, I'm not losing a wink of sleep. You know, he puts his head on the pillow knowing that he did the right thing, not always the easy thing, or better yet, the visible thing.
Yeah, and I've been through my share of chiefs now, and I think he leaves with a legacy of standing up for his own.
Well, and I don't think you're going to see too much of a contrast. I know there's some philosophical differences in leadership when it comes to impending Police Chief Jennings and Putney, but I think you're not going to find much daylight between the two of them when it comes to their appreciation, their love, the history of this organization, and their support for the men and the women working in the organization. I think you're going to find them in lockstep, Putney and Jennings.
Yeah, and Deputy Chief Jennings talked about that, how he's taken a little bit from all the past chiefs and kind of used that into his own. And I think that's one thing that he'll take away from from Putney is that, Putney always had his officers' support, maybe to a fault sometimes.
Some would argue, yeah. I mean, it does cut both ways. I get a real kick out of him, not just here on the couch, but when I talk with him privately about incoming Police Chief Jennings, and the man just lights up. He beams when he thinks about a future with a leader like Chief Jennings that's going to take the helm in the not too distant future. I think it makes him proud. Makes him proud having worked with Chief Jennings over the years and had some measure of assistance with Chief Jennings' development. It's I think he's really impressed and excited to see where the trajectory of a Chief Jennings administration goes.
Yeah, I think we're all excited to see where this next phase is. So, we talked about how you got to know Putney real well, but obviously he got to know you real well too. And, one thing that I can't get in my mind is how he talked about your murder of all these countless trees out there. I mean, what are we going to do about that?
You could put all the messaging in the world together for the guy. Think you've got it all figured out. This is where you need to go. And some days were better than other days, but that train, there were no tracks to that train. That train went wherever it wanted to go frequently. And, I'm not going to lie when I say there weren't times when we were just marching him down there to get out front of the community at a press conference. And I'm just not cringing. I'm like, oh, my gosh, where is he going? Where is he going? And what kind of fallout is it going to involve? And
that speaks to where he wants to go next with his life.
Yeah, he's his own man.
Yeah.
Always has been.
But the passion that he has for the community, and I think now you're going to see that fire come out a little more.
Oh, I don't think there's going to be any secret about that. I think he's going to, he's going to take a couple of breaths and, he's going to reload and be interesting to see where and when and how and just how much he does communicate. He sounds like he's got some really important core issues that he wants to underscore and address, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to repeat violent offenders, certainly that passion that he's got for, children, access and opportunity and, and programs like that at the grassroots level. And that's always been a passion of his. I'd be utterly shocked if he doesn't advance that in his private life. Chief Jennings, a couple of days, he'll be at the helm, and we're off to the races with a new guy. Mm-hmm. He's starting to unpack his vision, his philosophy, what's going to be his core elements, pillars of his administration. That's going to be exciting too. It's going to be a different look. It's going to be a different look for sure.
He's got his work cut out for him.
You ain't kidding. In this climate right now.
Yeah, to step into those shoes right now with everything else that's going on, here in Charlotte, nationally, it's going to be an uphill battle, but he knows that, and he knew that when he accepted the job, and I think he's up for the challenge. Yeah,
I don't think there's been a more tumultuous, uncertain time in the profession that we're witnessing right now, and for him to thrust himself in and say, yep, I'm all in. This is something I want to do. I want to lead this major city police department through difficult times nationally like this. Credit to him. A lot of people are running away from this thing right now. Mm-hmm. He's running into it. So, I think it says a lot about the character.
Yeah, I think the community's curious to see, what's going to happen. I think officers are curious to see too.
Sure. And they're hanging on you got to think they're hanging on every syllable.
Yeah, sometimes people are afraid that a position like this would change somebody. Mm-hmm. I don't think that'll happen with Jennings, but I think we're all just kind of waiting to see what this looks like with a Chief Jennings and a Deputy Chief Jennings.
Yeah, what's going on with you, man? How's the family?
We're hanging in there. It's a lot going on. We've been busy, but we're doing well.
Yeah, children all right, wife's all right. Yeah, she giving you a little bit of a break?
Yeah, well,
You giving her a little bit of a break?
Hey, here's some news on your part this week. One of your daughters graduated.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yep. We had to kind of limit what our experience was going to be. Only the wife and I were allowed to go. The others, her three sisters, they had to watch from home. They streamed it live. Everybody was physically distanced, the masks, the whole gamut.
Weird, huh?
Yeah. And she, she's a strong woman, young woman, my daughter, and she took it all in stride. I give her a lot of credit, to just be able to just roll with the punches like that. But yeah, that's been tricky. I got my eldest home from college. She's holed up in my den, which is interesting. I'm sure she's just enamored to be back home with mom and dad after spending a couple of years in college off by herself to be back in the house. So yeah, she's just thrilled to death. But
house.
Four-ring circus, and yours, they're just
on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
all younger, and so trying to keep them all corralled and busy and.
Yeah.
It's weird because the whole school ending, there was no real transition from school to summer because they were home anyways.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard to think, like, we're almost in July here.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom. You know, just
feels like we've been in this stretch forever.
Yeah, well, hopefully, you know, we're starting to see the end of it soon, and you know, things start getting back to, I guess, some semblance of normalcy, whatever the hell that looks like these days, and whatever's left of normal once this whole thing does, and I hope it does, evaporate. Lot that we went through today, and you know, we're going to continue to go through, and a lot of these issues, these bigger issues, they're not going away. A lot of exciting things coming down the pike with reform and this continued dialogue. A new police chief coming in.
It's not going away.
No, which is a good thing. Gives us plenty of fodder, plenty of content to pick through over, you know, some of our future go-rounds. And
your Raiders.
Oh
yeah, crazy.
Yeah, they're just beating our doors. I don't know if anybody's watching, but you know. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
You know, I know how busy you've been running around like a crazy person, and how valuable your time is.
Would have missed this opportunity, Rob.
Oh, he says that to everybody. You know, just
that is true.
Charmer at best.
That is true.
We appreciate everyone at home. You know, their time that they took. You know, so many things to do, so many places to do it. For all of you at home to spend a couple of minutes with us and unpack it with us and work through some of this important conversation. Now, immensely appreciated. Ask you, all of you, take care of each other, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay tuned.